Ahoy there, me hearties! This be Captain Silver Hook, and you're listening to the Two Old Pirates podcast. Set sail for an open sea of stories, tales, and some really crazy stuff. I expect you to like and subscribe, lest you be walking the plank. Ha ha ha!
Hello and welcome to the podcast, episode 134 of the Two Old Pirates. I hope that everybody's doing well out there. I had a little bit of a sinus thing going on for like the last 2 or 3 days. I wasn't able to get up a new episode, but I wanted to come with you about this. Me and Vinny did a couple episodes a while back when Rolling Stone magazine released the 200 best singers of all time. And we had our ideas about who should have been there and who maybe shouldn't have been there. And those are individual singers that we can all go and pick and choose. But bands are a totally different thing. Now, if you love music like I love music, we've all been listening to music the majority of our lives and stuff and enjoying it and stuff. But Rolling Stone, again, just decided to come out with the 50 greatest bands of all time. Now, we all have ideas about bands and stuff, but the thing is, this list was crazy. And I think some of you will be upset with it. I was. So if you love music, you love bands from all different eras, go ahead. Now, I'm not going to do all 50. Okay, I'm not crazy. I'm going to do the top 10. All right. So these are some of the bands that made the top 50. And granted, there's 50 bands, but I'm just going to name a few that made the top 50, but not the top 10. All right. You have the Beach Boys, the Police, REM, Queen, Metallica, Pearl Jam, Guns N' Roses, Genesis, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Creedence Clearwater Revival, or CCR, and also the Red Hot Chili Peppers. All of those made the top 50, but none of them squeaked into the top 10. And I know what you're saying. You're going to be sitting there saying, wait, the Beach Boys didn't make the top 10? You're going to sit there and say Metallica and Queen didn't make especially Queen didn't make the top 10? None of them made the top 10. They made the top 50, so at least they made the list. Now listen to the bands that did not make the top 50. And this will probably set you off. All right, ready? Journey. All right. I understand they've been stuck on Don't Stop Believing since that became a popular anthem for a lot of different things. But Journey sold tens of millions of records, was very, very popular from about 77 until 96. And they still tour. They're coming to Corpus Christi July 1st of 2026. And it'll be packed. And they still sell out everywhere. They might not be as big or even close to as big as they used to be. But Journey, Fleetwood Mac didn't make it. They have one of the best-selling albums of all time in Rumors. Great band. Amazing songs. They didn't make it. Aerosmith, one of the biggest rock bands of all time, have sold, hundreds of millions of records. Toys in the Attic and Pump. It just goes on and on and on. Great band. Didn't make top 50. Van Halen. Doesn't matter if it's David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar. That's one of the greatest bands of all time. Didn't make it. Lynyrd Skynyrd. Granted, the accident in 1977 with the plane crash dimmed it a little bit, but still, they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're considered one of the greatest bands, and for sure, probably the best Southern rock band of all time. Rush, the boys from up north in Canada. For just expertise, they had probably the greatest drummer of all time, Neil Peart. And as a three-piece, they dominated progressive rock for like 3 decades. Rush didn't make it. Iron Maiden. Nope. Didn't make it. ZZ Top. Pretty good band from here in Texas. Didn't make it. The Grateful Dead, known as the ultimate jam band, did not make it. Kiss, although maybe not technically the greatest band ever, they love to rock and roll all night and party all day. All right. Steely Dan didn't make it. The Eagles. They have the best-selling greatest hits of all time, and it's also the biggest-selling album of all time. They didn't make it. And then one of my favorite bands of all time, probably second all-time, the Doobie Brothers, with Michael McDonald, What a Fool Believes, all this stuff. Granted, you could sit there and say, maybe they're not in the top 50, Eric, but, my loyalty lies with them. I think they deserved at least one slot somewhere, maybe number 50. But yeah, all those bands, none of them made the top 50. That's a lot of really good bands, people. So we will start at number 10 for the top 10 bands of all time by Rolling Stone. Number 10, The Doors. Now, granted, The Doors were very, very big in the late 60s. They were only around for 4 years. They literally were only around for 4 years. And then Jim Morrison died. They released 4 albums. That was it. Now, granted, there's a lot of great songs and stuff, but to be the number 10 greatest band of all time when you only have 4 years of work? Number 9, The Velvet Underground. I don't know. My entire life growing up, I've always read about how they made so many other great bands come along because they were trying to get the Velvet Underground sound and stuff like that. The Velvet Underground were around for 3 years and they released 4 albums. And I've listened to their music. It ain't nothing. It ain't nothing. Number 8, love their music, highly overrated. Number 8, Nirvana. Nirvana was not that great of a band. Kurt Cobain could play around 3 chords, right? They were caught at a time and place in American history. They released 3 albums and 1 EP in 4 years. That was it. And then Kurt, killed himself. Thing is, first album, Bleach, third album, In Utero, if you listen to those sound like what Nirvana wanted to sound like. Their second album, Nevermind, which blew up to where you had cheerleaders and football players and punk rockers and skateboarders and everybody listened to it. That was produced by Butch Vig of the band Garbage, and he made it so radio friendly that you could listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit with the loud guitars, and it sounded good to everybody. And that really pissed off Kurt Cobain, so he got out of that with the next album, In Utero, and it did not sell anywhere near as much. Number 7, Radiohead. Radiohead is still around. They got their first record contract in 1993. They're still around. They've released 9 albums, and some of their albums, some of the critics are like, it's near perfection. And I'm like, I've tried to listen to stuff, and it's not that great. Not to be the number 7th greatest band. I mean, there's a lot of damn bands I listed that would whip Radio's ass up and down. Number 6, I do like this band. I don't know if I'd put them this high, but The Who. They were one of the 3 British bands from the 60s that came over and dominated and sold out arenas. The Who technically stopped recording in about 2019, but they were around from 65 to 2019. They did 12 albums, and they have some really, really famous songs. Number 5, one of the biggest selling bands of all time. They were only around for 9 years. Led Zeppelin. They released 8 albums, and they've sold 300 million copies of their albums. That's one of the top selling, I think they were number 2, next to maybe Michael Jackson, most albums sold. Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Bonham, John Paul Jones, classic. They were around till John Bonham drank himself to death and died. But they're 5th, and I can see them in the top 10 definitely. Number 4, Pink Floyd. Now, Pink Floyd technically was around until 1994, started in 67, and they released their last album in 94. They released 14 albums, and they've sold about 250 million copies. You know The Wall, Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon. You have all these amazing albums. At number 3, you're going to argue this one because you're thinking all time, all the bands that made the top 50, the bands that did not make the top 50, and then you have the number 3 band, U2. I'm sorry. U2 is not the 3rd greatest band of all time. Now, they are still active. They've been around since 1980 when they released their first album. And their last album came out in 2023. They've released 15 albums. They've sold 150 million copies. And the thing is, if you look at their career, it's just all over the place. They've changed dramatically in certain venues of music. And I think it's good that you do that. I think they've kind of become like, I don't want to say a joke. They can still pack like arenas and stuff, but when's the last time that they wrote a song that was really touched you or was on, like you're like, that is a great piece of music and stuff? Hasn't really been that way in a long, long time. So now we're down to the final two, the last two bands standing. And you know who's going to be on there. I knew before I ever looked at the list. Number 2, the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones have been around since 1964, and they just released their last album in 2023. They've released 26 albums. They've sold 200 million copies. And I have to tell you, the last album that they just released, it kicked ass. I mean, literally, when you listen to it and you know that those are 80-year-old men, and the spirit and the energy and the driving force of the music and stuff, I was like, holy crap. How does Mick and Keith and Ronnie still do this stuff? I mean, it's really good music on the latest album. It's not some kind of like, oh, it's just regular old Rolling Stone stuff. It was a good album. So they're still around, and I can't argue with that. I would say that they were the second best band of all time. And then finally, we have to give it up to the one and only greatest band of all time, the Beatles. They only recorded for 6 years. I want you to understand that. I mean, we got the Stones that have been around for, if they go on tour, they've been around 62 years. That's a long ass time, right? 62 years, and they're still touring and releasing albums and stuff like that. The Beatles were around for 6. The Beatles released 17 albums in 6 years, and they sold 600 million copies. Twice as much as the reputed, like, one of the greatest bands of all time, Led Zeppelin, sold 300 million. The Beatles doubled that, and they were only around 6 years. That is how freaking good they were. If you want to know how good they were, just a little bit of trivia. The Rolling Stones' first hit ever was a song that the Beatles gave to them as a gift to say, here's a song, try this one out. And it was their first hit ever. That's why the Rolling Stones have been known as the greatest rock band, but the greatest band of all time by far, when you have Harrison, Starr, Lennon, and McCartney, is the Beatles. Nothing even comes close to them in sales and the way they influence future music. When you look at bands that have huge hits now and they're like, the Beatles started it. Without the Beatles, I mean, talking about a band that's been broken up for 55 years and they're still influencing people. And I just saw Paul McCartney up at the Alamo Dome with like 50,000 people, and they were all standing and screaming, and I'm all like, and they're listening to songs that were 60 years old, 55 years old, 50 years old, 45 years old, and they're just belting it out, just singing as hard and as loud as they could for Paul. That was the top 10 bands of all time. Please let me know if you think any of those bands that I mentioned that did not make the top 50, if you believe that they should have been there. Please let me know if you think that this ranking is actually good. Please let me know if you think the ranking is actually bad. I'll be working on another episode over the weekend, but I thought that I'd slide this one in for you guys for the weekend so you guys could have something fun and maybe something to argue over. I really, really appreciate all the support that you guys have given us, and hope that you enjoy this content and that you'll like, share, and subscribe. So once again, for the Two Old Pirates and the top 10 bands of all time, I am Eric. Peace, and I will see you next time.